This video was made possible from the support of TrophyTackle.com and Mercury Marine, #1 on the water.
Fish, there's a fish right in back of my plug. Oh. Oh, look at this, right under the boat. This is Captain Al Lorenzetti from SkimmerOutdoors.com and Trophy Fishing Tackle. When the fish are tight to the beach, break out the plugs. Unbelievable fishing in the fall, along the beach. Gibbs Danny plug, me and my buddy Kevin Ryan, we are just having a blast. You know, I've chased striped bass for years and years, every different way you can fish for them. And my favorite of all is plugging. And specifically using a surface plug where the fish comes up and hits it on the surface and you get to see all of that activity. I just love that. For the plug to be effective, you either have to have fish in deep water that are all up top on the surface, which doesn't happen too often, or you can fish near shore where the water is, let's say, maybe 12 feet or less in depth, so a fish that's on the bottom 12 feet below can easily see a plug that's up on the surface. It was just one of those beautiful fall days, and striped bass were in the surf line, and I just said, well, this is it. This is the perfect plugging spot, and I broke out my Gibbs Danny, my yellow Danny metal lip swimmer, which I've made a little adjustments to, bent the front lip and the eye down so that plug works right up on the surface. And it was just mayhem and just awesome fishing. When I'm working plugs, I prefer to use, I guess you would call it a surf rod. I use a 9-foot stick, although some people are kind of averse to that lengthier rod on a boat, and they might want to use an 8-foot, which would be okay. But so I would say 8-foot for the typical average person, but I prefer 9-footers. I think it just gives me greater distance, and the greater distance I can cover, the better chances for me to get a fish on that retrieve. So I'm using 9-foot. Spinning rods. I have a Lama Glass blank rod that I like a lot, and that's probably my favorite at this time. And lately I've been using for reels, I think is an excellent reel for the money, is a Penn Battle. And I'm using the 70 series, which is like one step down from the largest Battle. And that works great, and it suited well to those 9-foot rods in terms of balance and everything, and line capacity. And again, when I'm fishing plugs, I prefer mono all the time over braid. I just don't like braid. It presents certain problems that I don't want to get into in detail, but I use 20-pound high-vis monofilament line. And that works just fine for me. I get plenty of distance when I throw that plug, and that combination seems to just work beautifully. My terminal setup that I use, basically, as I mentioned, I use 20-pound high-vis mono. At the end of that, I attach an 80-pound Spro swivel, a 50 or an 80. And then I use about a 3-foot, 2.5-foot length of 60-pound test fluorocarbon or pink Andy line, to which I have a quick clip. I've been using the Tactical Anglers quick clips because they're excellent, they're very strong. And this way also I have a way of rapidly changing plugs if I want to change color or switch to something else. It works out beautifully. And you know, that's been very effective and it works great for me. On this particular day of fishing, we were in the ocean, so a factor you have to consider is the breakers, the ocean waves. You have to be careful that your boat doesn't get caught up in that. That could be a catastrophe, so you have to basically stay a safe enough distance away from the shore so that you're not going to get caught in the wash, but close enough so that you can reach the area where the fish are, which is usually just behind the breaker line. So that's another good reason why you want to use a rod that can throw a plug a great distance. And a Danny plug is not very aerodynamic. You're not going to get a tremendous amount of distance with it, so you have to get fairly close, but with a stout rod, 9-foot length, you can still get a pretty good distance and reach that area just behind the breakers. Of course, with your boat staged offshore of that in the safe zone. When you're plugging, there are lots of little techniques, little tricks that make it more effective, make you more effective and catch more fish. One of the problems with throwing plugs, especially into the wind, is that the plug will foul on your line. As you cast it, the plug actually will roll over and one of the hooks will catch the leader, and then when it hits the water, it's a mess. It's tangled, it's fouled, and you just wasted valuable time, that cast that has to be retrieved and start over. One of the things I found that helps is when I cast my plug and it's about 9/10 of the way to its destination on the water surface, I'll touch my finger to the edge of the spool to create a little tension on the line just before the plug hits the water so that it will turn around and be in the proper position facing me and ready to start to retrieve. A lot of times people just cast a wooden plug, a floating plug, and it hits the water, and now it's laying sideways, and if it didn't get fouled on its way there in the air, it lays in the water and then catches the leader material. But when you just touch the spool before the plug hits the water, everything comes tight, the plug turns and is facing you and is actually ready to retrieve and isn't going to foul itself in the leader. So, you know, that's very important. When you throw a plug and it makes contact with the water surface and you get that loud splash, that's going to be attractive to fish. They're going to hear that noise and look for the plug. And if your plug hit the water and it's laying there looking stupid, sideways, or not ready to work until you've done all kinds of things and taken the stretch out of your line and loose line, then the plug isn't effective when the fish is looking at it. It just doesn't look right. So when my plug hits the water, I want it to be ready to retrieve instantly. And so by just putting the brakes on gently, just a light fingertip touch to the edge of the spool to get the line taut, as the plug hits the water, it's in a perfect position to be retrieved. And then I like to flip my bail manually rather than turn the handle. When you just crank the handle, the line sometimes can develop a loop in it, and you'll get a tangle or a wind knot on your next cast, and that's a problem. And it just takes too long for you to swing over, turn the handle, you got some loose line, the plug isn't working right away. So I cast just before the plug hits the water surface, I touch the edge of the spool, get everything tight, the plug lands, flip the bail, start turning the handle. Instantly, the plug's got to be moving. And on a Danny plug, the action that catches is the wobble, left to right. That tail is moving like this. The tail hook with the bucktail material on it looks like the tail of a fish, and it's just very, very enticing. There's no rod movement whatsoever. Just the rate of retrieve is going to create that wobbly motion of the plug. If you see the plug skip out of the water, you're reeling too fast. If the plug isn't wobbling, you're reeling too slow. So all of these little things, if you can master them, are going to make you more effective in catching fish with a plug. So now we've cast the plug. It's out there as far as we can get it, probably in the surf line itself. and you begin your retrieve. When I start the retrieve and the plug is far from the boat, I keep my rod tip straight up. My line then runs down and just hits the water just before the plug. This will help to keep the plug on the surface. However, as you get closer to the boat, if you don't lower your rod tip, you're going to have the plug skipping on the top of the water surface, which isn't effective. So as you get closer to the boat, your rod tip has to come down to almost a horizontal position. And you still want to work that plug right up to the side of the boat. Many times the fish will follow it a long way and not make the move to attack until you're very close to the boat. So don't stop 20 feet away and yank the plug out of the water. Work it right up to the boat until you have it at the exact spot in terms of the length out of your tip for your next cast. Pick it up, open the bail, hook it up, make another cast as quickly as you can. As I mentioned, I've had fish eat that plug literally 2 feet from my boat as I'm ready to bring it out of the water. So you have to be alert and have to watch and be ready for something to happen. And a lot of times it'll scare you when a 20 or 30 pound fish knocks that plug or jumps on the plug right next to you and splashes you with the water. It's like, it's very exciting, but you know, a lot of times people panic and they do something wrong. But that plug, it's effective all the way because fish will follow it for a long time. We had fish come up, actually bounce the plug with their nose. We had a couple of fish smack it with their tail, then turn around and jump on it. A lot of times when you watch your plug, and that's why I like the yellow Danny, because it's easy for the angler to see the plug and visually watch it. Whereas if you're using a darker color, sometimes you lose it depending on the lighting and the water. But with a yellow plug or a white plug, you can see it very clearly. When you're watching your plug, look for boils behind it. When a fish is following the plug, they kind of do it in spurts. They'll swim up to it, and then they'll stop behind it if they decide not to eat it. But while they make that little lunge for it, they create a little eddy or a little swirl in the water, and then you know you have a fish following your plug. What I like to do then, if he follows the plug and doesn't eat it, I like to stop the plug just for a second, give it an erratic kind of motion, like it's stunned or something, and then start a little bit more rapidly a retrieve. Get it to wiggle, get it to wobble. Stop it again if the fish is still there, and then continue on a straight retrieve, and finally you'll get that fish, you know, annoyed enough or interested enough so that's going to really jump on that plug. So all well and good. We did the right technique. We cast our plug out there. We worked it back towards the boat. Fish jumped on it. You got a great fish on. You're fighting them around the boat. And now comes the moment of truth. When you get the fish near the boat, you're going to have to handle that fish in a safe way. Some people will net their fish, but I find it's just so problematic when you have a plug with 3 treble hooks on it and you put a net down and you get the fish and the plug in the net. I think it's traumatic to the fish that they're in the net, and now you have this plug with 3 hooks. You're trying to get out of the netting. You have a fish thrashing around. It just becomes a big mess. So I never net fish that I catch on plugs. What I do is I use a boga grip. I get the safety line around my hand. I have my boga grip ready. When the fish comes to the side of the boat, I grab my leader. That's why that 2.5 to 3 feet of leader material after the swivel is important. It gives you a safe handhold you can grab onto that's not going to break. I grab that 60-pound test leader material and I hold the fish off the side of the boat until I can get the boga grip, till the fish opens its mouth and I can get the boga grip on the lower lip. Once I have that under control, I have the fish on the boga, I bring them up to the side of the boat, get my long needle nose pliers and work the hooks out of the fish and simply take them with the boga grip to the side of the boat and release them. So that system works great for me, and it's also the safest way to handle these fish. All of the tackle I've discussed, talked about, and so forth for plugging is all available at Trophy Tackle or tunafishtackle.com.